Democrats, as much as they understand they have to emote and pretend they care about all the peasants out there that don't have their electric vehicles, that are struggling to put their gross, icky gas in their cars, the unwashed masses with their gasoline, Democrats have to do that so that they can get the votes, plus whatever other votes they can get through shady means. They can get the votes together to stay in power. But ultimately, they see all of these things that you and I talk about as crises, whether on the economic front, the environmental front, the border, crime, as opportunities to push more of what they want from a policy perspective.
It's amazing how often the quote-unquote experts continue to be wrong about inflation, which is the overwhelming number one story that is out there in America today. At 8:30 a.m. Eastern, right before many of you probably got into work, or right as many of you were getting to work, inflation comes out. It is now at a 9.1% level, up from 8.6% last month. It is, drumbeat please, above expectations yet again. The economic disaster that is Joe Biden's administration continues. And here are some numbers from the CPI report. Over last year, 98.5% cost increase in fuel, oil, gas up just shy of 60%, electricity up nearly 14%, food at home up over 12%, new cars up 11%, transportation 9%. You know it, you experience it, you knew it was going to happen because unlike the Biden administration, you actually live in the real world. Roadmap for where we're headed. Senator Josh Hawley, he went viral yesterday for saying men can't get pregnant. I'm not even making that up. That is why he went viral, from Missouri, the senator there. One of them will join us, Ryan Gerdusky, on the latest data on the midterms. All of that coming your way. Study out from the New York Times, Republicans adding minority voters overwhelmingly as the Democrats have become the party of woke white college graduates. There is a new video from the Uvalde shooting that is going to make you all sick. Joe Biden is now in the Middle East, and Joe Manchin, senator from West Virginia, has said basically Congress needs to stop spending money. He is a sane Democrat. But, Buck, I wanted to play this for everybody out there. The Biden administration experts have been telling you that inflation is not a big deal for a long time now. This is a montage of Joe Biden, of our good friend, former Little Red Lying Hood, our former White House press secretary and speaker, before we got to Karine Jean-Pierre, also Treasury Secretary Janet Yellen. All of this, that of course is Jen Psaki, who was the former White House press secretary, all of them telling you, no big deal, everything's going to be fine, inflation is transitory, it's a good thing. Listen.
I really doubt that we're going to see an inflationary cycle.
The overwhelming consensus is going to pop up a little bit and then go back down.
This is something that will settle down.
Transitory.
And the data shows that most of the price increases we've seen were expected and are expected to be temporary. It's highly unlikely that's going to be long-term inflation that's going to get out of hand. I don't know anybody who's worried about inflation.
What is the Granholm plan to increase oil production in America?
Oh my God, that is hilarious.
Make no mistake, inflation is largely the fault of Putin. I'm going to do everything I can to minimize Putin's price hike here at home.
If you want to get rid of inflation, the only way to do it is to undo a lot of the Trump tax cuts.
I mean, all of this is embarrassing, and unfortunately, the people who are bearing this massive tax increase, you heard at the end there, Biden trying to blame Vladimir Putin. When Russia invaded Ukraine, Buck, inflation was already 7.9%. What's your reaction to 9.1% inflation?
Oh, it's just a question now of, are we in the Biden recession, and how much worse is the Biden recession going to get? Now, what I mean by are we in it, if it hasn't started, it's about to start. Now that we see this trend with inflation, and you get into some difficulties here because politically they're obviously going to want to do whatever they can to make it seem better before the midterms. And so they may forestall the recession at some level. They may try to do whatever they can. For example, the Fed raising interest rates. People are talking about huge interest rate hikes now to try to rein this in. Well, you can either do that now, take the pain now, or you can try to do it more slowly and do a little bit of, monetary magic here and there to make it seem less bad in the near future. But that'll probably make it worse over the long term, meaning you're going to get it. Do you want to take your medicine now, or do you want to have to take more medicine financially down the line? That's probably what America is facing right now. And with the feckless and reckless Democrats in charge like Joe Biden, I think you can expect that politics will guide this, not the best interests of the actual American people. And this is all you have to do. You look at economies around the world that have had a terrible time over the last, let's say, 20 or 30 years. Inflation is ruinous. Inflation has so many components. We think of it in terms of what it does to people paying for gas and groceries, and because that's what you're feeling every day. And so that's why the American people, the American voter, are looking at this and saying, oh my gosh, what is going on here? I'm getting poorer. I'm doing the same work. I'm living in the same budget, but I'm getting poorer every month. But when you look at it from the business and long-term investment sense as well, a lot of businesses, if inflation keeps up like this, will start to say, I can't make long-term investments because I don't know what the future is going to look like. The lack of stability that this creates, the economic distortions in an inflationary period, have all kinds of secondary effects that slow growth, slow investment, make people poorer. It's going to start bringing up the unemployment rate. By the way, the way we gauge unemployment in this country is a whole other conversation. I think it doesn't really reflect what the job market's truly doing right now. So this is Clay, this is a disaster for the country.
Yep.
A disaster for the Biden administration. The worst in 40 years. We keep saying that. It's going to be the worst and even longer than that, I think, when all's said and done. And does anyone think that the people in charge, you just played that montage, which is so excellent. They have been so wrong about everything. When Biden says we're on the problem of inflation, we're doing everything we can to bring prices down. This is like Dr. Fauci telling you right now, we just need a few more shots. You just need to mask up a little more. Not going to work, folks. The people who are wrong about everything aren't suddenly going to be right.
Joe Biden would have been better off if he had gone, for those of you who remember the Seinfeld television show, there was an episode that's very popular where George Costanza just decides that everything in his life is going wrong. So he's going to start doing the exact opposite of what he thinks he should do, and everything starts going better for him. Joe Biden would have had a more successful presidency so far if he had come into office and done the exact opposite of everything that he's done. And we should mention that the craziest thing about how bad Biden has been is he would have been far worse off if he had actually gotten Build Back Better passed, because he would have spent another $5 trillion plus, and we'd be sitting at 15% or 20% inflation right now, which leads us, Buck. People say, okay, where are we going from now? Biden's still trying to spend money. They're trying to pass a tax increase and spend billions and billions of dollars more before July runs out and we officially move into the midterm election cycle. And Joe Manchin put out a statement that said, basically, no matter what spending aspirations some in Congress may have, I'm reading directly from his statement, it is clear to anyone who visits a grocery store or a gas station that we cannot add any more fuel to this inflation fire. Now, I'm hopeful that means that Joe Biden is that Joe Manchin is basically waving the white flag and saying, no more. We are done negotiating. The best thing that Republicans, because we got a lot of senators, congressmen, and their staffs who listen, the best thing that anybody on Capitol Hill could do is basically run out the clock on Joe Biden and the remainder of this congressional cycle, not pass anything more, don't make anything worse. We'll see what happens with the inflation data on July a month from now when we're in mid-August. but it's not going to get much better before the midterms. I don't think anybody's arguing.
And they're
that.
not going to take the rational response to this that you were just laying out. Remember, Democrats said very well by Rahm Emanuel. It's one of the oldest aphorisms out there. But a crisis is an opportunity. Democrats, as much as they understand, they have to emote and pretend they care about all the peasants out there that don't have their electric vehicles, that are struggling to put their gross, icky gas in their cars, the unwashed masses with their gasoline. Democrats have to do that so that they can get the votes, plus whatever other votes they can get through shady means. They can get the votes together to stay in power. But ultimately, they see all of these things that you and I talk about as crises, whether on the economic front, the environmental front, the border, crime, as opportunities to push more of what they want from a policy perspective. Put us in charge more, and we'll fix it. I mean, this reminds me of the big line for the Obama administration when they had the stimulus, which was $1 trillion. To remind everybody, that was $1 trillion, and you got the Tea Party. Joe Biden spent $2 trillion like he found an extra 20 in the back pocket of his pants.
Yeah.
And everyone was like, oh, okay, I guess no, that was crazy town. And what they were saying was, oh, he didn't spend enough. You're going to see with the Biden administration on a range of issues, including the economy, the problem is the Republicans. The problem is we can't do enough of what we want. The problem is they're going to try the Build Back Better thing just because it sounds good as a slogan or it sounds good as words. The second anyone dives into it, to your point, Clay, it would have made everything markedly worse. I mean, to anyone who operates in reality. But, you see these supply chain issues. You see the opposition to fossil fuel. The Democrats they're honestly religious about it. The situation of Dutch farms, the situation of the globalists deciding that people can't continue on living these fancy lifestyles. Sri Lanka just had an actual coup because it was pursuing crazy, environmentally friendly ESG-style policies. It's not like the libs look at this and do what you and I and everyone listening to this does and say it's a disaster. They go, we just need to tweak it. Real Bidenism has never been tried, Clay. That's the problem.
And that's why we need a landslide in less than 4 months. And also why we need another landslide in 2024, because until they get their ass kicked, I don't think Democrats are going to recognize how out of touch their policies are and, frankly, how disastrous they are for the overwhelming amount of Americans out there, white, black, Asian, and Hispanic, because 9.1% inflation is a default tax on the poorest among us. It hurts everybody, but when you're living paycheck to paycheck, you feel it's so much worse. Joe Biden is the worst president in 100 years or more, and I don't see things getting any better at all.
It's a really tough sell at this stage, even for Biden himself, to make that this administration is not just a catastrophe. I thought it would be bad. I have received at some level, Clay, a humility of prediction here because I thought it would be bad, but I was actually worried that just by existing post-pandemic, he'd have a pretty strong economy to work with. But no, I underestimated the ability. I knew he would be bad, but I underestimated how bad he could actually be. That's the best way I could put it. And I think everyone listening knows that. They feel the same way. They're like, well, this guy's a joke, but it's a deeply unfunny joke now. A reporter today asked Biden about a poll that shows that 66% of Democrats do not want him to be. Democrats, not general electorate, don't want him to be the nominee. Here's how, so cool, calm, collected, unifying, cuddly Biden responds.
Mr. President, what's your message to Democrats who don't want you to run again?
They want me to run.
2/3 say they
Read
don't.
the polls. Read the polls, Jack. You guys are all the same. That poll showed that 92% of Democrats, if I ran, would vote for me.
A majority of Democrats say they don't want you to run again in 2024.
92% said if I did, they'd vote for me.
So he doesn't understand polls, I think. I mean, usually I would say he's lying, but Clay, do you think he can actually process the difference between do Democrats want Joe Biden to be their nominee, and if it has to be Biden, they'd vote for him over Trump? This is not the compelling argument that Biden seems to think it is.
Yeah, and that number came out in the New York Times poll. a poll that I think most people would recognize, given the New York Times history, is not going to be favorable to Republicans. So this was a poll of Democrats asking if they wanted the sitting incumbent president to run again, and nearly 2/3 of them said, no, we don't want you to run. Buck, we've never seen anything like this. No one who is living today has ever seen a sitting incumbent president have this little support for re-election in basically our lives. And that's why I think that he is going to decide in February or March not to run. And by decide, I mean the Democrats are going to force him to announce that he's not going to run. Biden landed. Did you see the footage of Biden landing in Israel earlier this morning, Buck? They were trying to avoid, they made a big show of Joe Biden's not going to shake hands with anyone. And initially he was fist bumping, and then he started shaking hands. And why you're sitting out there saying, wait a minute, he shook hands with 500 people at this gun legislation signing bill. The next day, suddenly it's not safe to do it. What they're trying to avoid is a photo of Biden shaking hands with Mohammed bin Salman, MBS, who is basically running Saudi Arabia, because Biden said he runs a pariah state and he would never interact with him. So now they're just trying to get away with, in the Middle East, fist bumping. Yet Biden himself has already landed and started shaking hands. The guy is clueless on a level that a president has never been clueless in any of our lives. And increasingly, you heard Newt Gingrich yesterday on the show with us, Buck, say it was unfair to compare Biden and Carter because Carter was so much more competent than Biden could have ever dreamed of being. And it just keeps getting worse for Biden on a day-to-day basis.